All right, Dan.
Doc, how you doing?
Good. Welcome to Quick and Spine Show. We're going to do a quick, not really a quick interview, but an interview on Facebook Live. We're going to do also podcasts and a YouTube channel and everything else we're going to do. But with yours, Dan, you're here right at home. You've been here for a while now. You understand how this business works. Okay, and talk to me initially about what you guys do here at Right at Home.
Well, first of all, Right at Home is non-medical in-home care.
Okay.
So, and the reason I say non-medical is because there are two types of care that when something happens, the doctors will refer or hospitals refer for you to get some help or some post-care. And home health is in the whole medical sector of life here, of care.
Exactly.
Right at Home is involved with the non-medical aspects of in-home care, which offers the flexibility factor of you can use us whenever you want. Whereas medical care, you know, they'll be out for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, depending on what the medical need is, which your insurance covers the home health aspect, the medical side, and insurance does not cover the non-medical side, the most important side.
Well, and my biggest thing is how, because this podcast is always about staying healthy and being less stressed and what have you, how do you, because I do a lot of workshops with seniors, how do you prepare them from one standpoint to get ready for, okay, if you need this, let's make sure you're prepared, make sure you're set up for this?
Yeah, there's a couple different avenues of planning, and that's most important. You want to be able to have a plan initially, because let's face it, we don't know what's going to happen to us, to our families, to our loved ones.
No.
And unfortunately, we're not nurses, and so we have to find out who are the right people around us to help us. So you start with, a plan. You have to have a game plan, whether it's a private long-term care insurance policy, which is definitely something to look into. You could look at the different avenues of equity you have for reverse mortgage and just kind of life plan the financial factor. Because let's face it, non-medical in-home care, it's expensive. And it's definitely needed, and so we have to find, a budget and a plan to successfully get the care we need, as opposed to just, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to help mom and dad, which is disaster on all avenues of just life.
Well, the stress of doing that as either the parent being helped or the child or sibling or guardian, that's overwhelming sometimes.
And it can be. And, we're used to, as human beings, reacting to whatever the situation is. So the best case scenario is to plan the what-if factor.
Exactly.
What's going to happen if mom or dad falls down, goes into the hospital, and then suffers whatever the injuries might be? What kind of care are they going to get after the fact? And what kind of care is insurance going to cover versus them going back into the hospital for the same thing? So you really want to do your research and connect with the right people around you to understand what the dynamics of home care is. It's not babysitting.
No.
You have licensed, trained, certified nursing assistants that come to your home to establish a post-care plan to make sure quality of life is good, to make sure your home health aspects are good. You can work alongside those. Getting dressed in the morning, getting a meal, making sure the medication management plan is on point, making sure you follow up with your primary care physician. There's so many times that when somebody is released from a hospital, the case management throws all this information at you, and unfortunately, it's too much. It can be very overwhelming.
They have no idea. They run a business. They're a mom or a dad. Right. They have their own lives. Yeah. Now they're said, hey, look, your mom and dad mom or dad or grandparent are stuck in the hospital. This happened to them. Can you come down right now? They dropped their whole life. They haven't planned for this. So what I deal with on my end is how do we keep seniors healthy? On your end is how do you rehab them with a proper CNA like you had mentioned? What are CNAs? Tell me about what they are.
Well, CNA is an acronym for Certified Nursing Assistants. Okay. And most of our caregivers who help us out, they come from a lot of different school programs. They're trying to become LVNs, physicians assistants.
So they're on the way up.
Correct.
Okay.
And many of our caregivers move on to their journey. They become EMTs, nurses, and whatnot. And so for them, it's nice to have a place where they can have one-on-one skilled training while they're going through their programs. So that's what the CNA is. And they can be anywhere from 25 years old on up to 65 years old.
Yeah.
Which that kind of leads me to that personal aspect. Let's face it, how do you trust somebody to come into your home to help you get dressed, to help you change, to help you bathe, to make sure that your medication is on point, to make sure that your diet is on point? And not only that, but the general companionship, the personal touch that a home care giver can do for you. And that is so important. And it's one of the things that Right at Home where we strive to make sure that we match up those personalities.
Well, that's the thing. You've done this for long enough to where as one thing, a company, as a franchise, globally, you've mentioned now, right? Not just nationally, globally.
Yeah.
You have ways to interview and screen out at both in your office, but also a general screening too. You mentioned live scan.
Live scanning. So in 2016, the state finally came down and said, look, we have to have regulatory for in-home care, just like you would for a hospice program or a medical program that's coming into your home.
Yes.
So there are many companies out there who are trying to avoid that so they don't have to pay the training fees. They don't have to have the liability, the workman's comp. If you're going to invite somebody into your home, you want to be prepared that if something were to happen into the home, we have you covered. And we do. And that platform we work off is, you have to do that or else it's illegal. So, there's companies out there that...
you can do it if you get caught at that point, then everyone gets...
Well, my main thing is it always comes down to the care. The right care. Why are you helping somebody? Is it for the right reasons or is it to make money? And that to me is, it's heart first, dollar second. Look, we're going to be successful if we do it the right way. And that's what we do. So having that licensure, which is called an HCO license, it's a home care organization license, always do the research and always look for that license. Whether you use Right at Home or you use another company, that is essential to protecting you and your family, to having care in your own home.
So as either the caregiver, guardian of that person, or the person who may need long-term care down the line, or care after a hospital, whatever it might be, having that idea, okay, here's my plan. If something happens to me or my family member, this is what I should be doing.
Correct. Absolutely. And so really that magic number when to think about what's going on in life, kind of in that late 30s, early 40s, just really start a conversation.
Yeah.
You don't have to make any drastic decisions.
Early 40s?
Yeah, I would say in the early 40s, just kind of start that conversation. Look at the family history. Look at if there's any cognitive issues in the family gene pool that, maybe mom has dementia. Let's take a look. How is that going to affect placement of mom, whether she can stay in the home, whether there's a beautiful assisted living or memory care that we're partners with, and we can obviously refer families to those. But you want to at least know prior to an incident.
Exactly.
Once you do that, now not only are you not worried about it, but you can plan financially because it isn't the least expensive type of deal. You have to plan, and we're working on a program right now with Harvard Medical.
Good.
And what they're doing is a study that is trying to get our general insurances to protect families from going back into the hospital. It's known as readmission. And hospitals are struggling with this because over 11,000 people a day are turning 65. There's too many people for the facilities that are there.
Okay.
So how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to keep people from going into the hospital? Well, the answer is having a private duty, one-on-one caregiver in the home or wherever home is to make sure medication is correct, to make sure the follow-up with the physician is correct, to make sure all the things that are being or supposed to be being done are getting done. And it's so preventative from going back into the hospitals. And the hospitals are starting to realize this. The Harvard study is basically collecting data from us. We send to legislation.
Us meaning caregivers in general, or
what they're doing is they're surveying our caregivers while we work.
Just Right at Home or other companies?
Right at Home exclusively.
Just only, okay.
So what they're doing, because they understand our platform,
Got it. Okay.
It's licensed platform, it does things the right way,
Okay.
and so they're collecting the data from our caregivers. Was there a hospitalization? Was there a change in care every time our caregiver clocks out? That data goes right to the Harvard Medical Study, which in turn gets sent to legislation so they can determine, yes, this is preventative. Can we get our general insurances to cover at least a portion of what the costs are for home care? And that's down the line. We don't know that answer yet. All I know is that the data is being discovered and something might happen, which would be fantastic. There's different relationships Right at Home has within the community where we can help people of low income through other facilities and state-funded programs, adult day programs and whatnot. So home care can be for everybody. You just have to have an initial plan. You don't need somebody every day. You don't need somebody 24/7. If you want a little bit of help, maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, just to make sure you have some respite care, because let's face it, we're all not nurses.
Well, and a lot of it, I think, is you don't know what kind of injury you're going to have.
Right.
You might have a minor heart attack. Yeah. You might have a physical injury. Mm-hmm. So when you say plan, is it planning for one thing? I mean, because you mentioned coming maybe 1 or 2 days. What does a normal, if you want to call it, someone that's recovering from a physical injury, released from the hospital, how long does that take sometimes?
Well, I'll start with saying that the plan of care for us, we'll help anybody 18 or over.
Okay.
So it can be from many different aspects of injuries or whatnot, but when you plan for care, it really comes down to the budgets. Kind of saying, what can I afford per week? Per week. Maybe I can afford $200. Maybe I can afford $60. And work that into something to prevent mom and dad from going into the hospital. Start there.
This is a plan before an injury occurs.
Correct.
Before something, a condition occurs.
Right. Okay. When we react to that injury, now your hand is forced because we're going to either A, choose to help our loved one, or B, not. Yeah. And unfortunately, I've seen it the not way. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's a struggle. People's lives change. And our job in the home care community is to prevent that.
Yeah.
And if I can shed some light, some education, and some insight to fixing that and being that hero for that family, let's do it.
What I would think too, in some situations, to where if you don't get home care, if something does cause a re-injury or a fall, it can cause more damage to that person, more physical damage. Now they have to go to the hospital, and the rehab may become a lot longer, so your cost increases if you don't have a plan set up.
And not to mention just the patient, but the family member who's trying to prevent the fall. In your practice, you see it all the time.
People that have back problems from helping their relatives when they're trying to help them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, now you have to pay double. And a lot of individuals think, well, I'll just place mom in a home. Well, what does that mean? And there's so much misinformation out there, Doc, that assisted living can be fantastic. It can be beautiful. What we do is one-on-one care. And so for the person wondering, do I send mom or dad into an assisted living or a skilled nursing program, or do I let mom and dad live at home, or have both?
Yeah.
The idea is we provide non-medical one-on-one care. At assisted livings, that doesn't exist.
No.
It is a nice place to live. They have activities. They have some nurses on site. But the reality is that individual who needs fall prevention, maybe has some cognitive issues, they still need somebody next to them to prevent them from falling down. And we have many families that are in assisted living that use us alongside paying for the assisted living. That's what they want to do. That is perfectly okay. The idea, though, is with home care, what you need to know is that it's an extremely flexible, aspect to having somebody come out. And really, the most important thing is you do get to stay at home.
What I think a lot of it is, when I do my senior talks and workshops, is they come to my talks, especially the ones that are filled, because they want to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. They want to stay independent.
Yep.
So by coming into their home, you're keeping in their non-stress, they're used to that environment, change their environment, they know where everything is.
Right.
I would assume that's safer for them, less risk, and they're going to heal better both physically and mentally from that.
100%. And in our philosophy with the whole Right Care program we have here at Right at Home is, from that initial phone call or outreach, we go into a nice at-home consultation. And we can talk more about that later on, but
That's part 2 or 3. I don't know. We're not sure yet.
We stress to really create a care plan that is fitting for the initial, if it's an injury or coming out of a hospital, what's the main focus? What's the initial plan of attack from a safety standpoint? Then we move forward from more of a caregiving personalization plan point. What kind of personality is mom or dad going to gel with? Guy or girl? What kind of hobbies do the caregivers like and enjoy? And, taking a walk with dad, taking dad to a movie. Look, just because we age doesn't mean we stop living.
No.
And it definitely doesn't mean we stop caring.
Good. And I think a lot of it is, if you can plan that before you have an injury, and again, take the risk out of it, okay, when someone goes in for this, when Sally goes in for this, let's set her up with here that on staff right now if something happens.
And that's the smart approach.
Huge. Because you know everyone that works with you and for you, so why not match up those personalities so there's no extra stress involved once they go in, not come out of the hospital per se.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is, and our seniors sometimes reluctant to go into home care.
Sure.
Why is that?
We deal with many different cultures.
Okay.
And it's how we were raised.
Okay.
Stubborn comes to mind. Individuals have a lot of pride about their own home and that we can do it ourselves. And it's just a facade. And it's scary. There's a fear factor there. I'm going to let somebody I don't even know in my home. And so that's what we think about. We feed ourselves this misinformation of fear. And I will say what really happens is after about a week, that gelling and that relationship and bond really start to click. Yeah. And I will be honest, sometimes it's an initial struggle, but you don't make friends in a day. And if there's a safety issue, obviously, that's first.
Yes.
But most of our families who meet a caregiver and get matched up, usually after about a week or so, they can't live without them.
Yeah.
And I've seen many different dynamics involved in that. And honestly, that's why we do what we do. That relationship aspect does come to light, and our caregivers are so good.
When I think a lot of is if you can spend the first maybe few days or 2-3 weeks with a person, they've mentally given into, I trust this person to help me. Right. And then the rehab starts both physically and mentally. Because realize if the first 3 or 4 weeks the rehab hasn't started, they haven't started moving or getting themselves healthy again, that scar tissue settles in. So now you've made your job 10 times harder.
That's exactly
right. It has to start here upstairs. I want to. I feel comfortable. I need to. This person's here to help me, and I trust this person. If you have that connection, you've increased your healing by 1,000% in my mind, because you're going to avoid permanent injury and a rehospitalization where now their mindset becomes more fearful. I have to be careful what I do.
That's correct.
Because I have to physically get myself stronger. By having more confidence, I can do this.
You touched on a word earlier, independence.
Yes.
And that's another fear that the individual has is, I'm going to let a nurse or somebody in the medical arena come into my house and help me. I'm giving up my independence.
Yes.
And it couldn't be further from the truth.
It's a perspective.
It's a perspective, and when I meet with families, I do everything I can to make sure you achieve more independence while having somebody there. You are the decision maker. You get to point and shoot. This is your life. We just want to be a right hand to that life, especially when it's definitely needed or doctor ordered.
I want to think if you've come home from the hospital, you had an injury you didn't expect, realize your balance might be off. Your physical ability, you might have some weakness too, especially if you stay more than a couple days. So your ability to realize what you were before you were in the hospital to now is completely off, completely different. So your chance of having a fall, of not being able to hit that one step or fall down the stairs is huge. Why not let someone help you so long-term your dependence stays on your own, you live on your own if you want to, versus having injury that may continue to happen more and more.
Especially at night.
Oh, gosh.
And we all get up and we're all a little confused or delirious.
Even at 43. It's crazy.
That's a good-looking 43 right there.
And makeup, lighting. He has
it's 4 hours of makeup before all this. I get it.
Huge.
So, especially at night, if somebody has sundowners. And,
what are sundowners?
When you can't understand the difference between day and night.
Okay.
And so you're up, at night. Your sleep schedule is all over the place.
It's called sundowners, okay.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we get up, we walk around, we want to get a drink of water, we need to go to the restroom, and if we have, like you said, any balance issues or we're a fall risk, we're going to go down, we're going to hit our head. And now the care just went from maybe a potential 10 to 12 hours a week to 24/7. And the cost of that can be pretty astronomical. So it's smart, if there is a little bit of an ailment, if there is a little bit of worry in your life about mom and dad or yourself, check it out. And what's nice is we don't use any contracts. You don't have to use us
that's right.
for 2, 3, 4 weeks or months or whatnot. You could use us one day in your life, and that's it.
And one thing you had mentioned a lot, which people worry about, is the cost. I deal with, when I talk about cost, I talk about stress.
Yeah.
Will your stress decrease by spending a couple more dollars to make sure yourself or a loved one has been taken care of properly?
Absolutely. When you talk about costs, and when I deal with families, when you call in and you ask about pricing, we always quote a range because we need to understand what the care is first. Over the phone, we can't truly understand what the real need is. So that's the point of my personal, assessment and consultation, if you will. And what you say is the stress level. When somebody starts with us, it usually takes about 3 or 4 weeks. And what happens is they'll go from maybe 8 to 10 hours a week to 22 to 24 hours a week.
What kind of condition?
I'm talking a normal, I have a tough time, maybe I've had a stroke.
Got it. Okay.
I can't use my right arm very well, so I need help getting dressed. Okay? Now you throw in a little bit of a cognitive disease, maybe it's dementia, vascular dementia, or somebody might have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. And what happens is, after those few days a week that the only reason we're there is because the son and daughter can't be there, what happens is our family says, you know what, I'd love to have Sally on Friday and Saturday as well, because I just love it when we get to go out to the park and hang out with the dogs and enjoy, because now there's a quality of life that you really didn't know about until you had your caregiver. And so it is only human nature to worry about the negatives, right? That's what we touch something that's hot, we pull away, we're not going to touch it again. But what we don't do is we don't explore, and we don't understand the quality of care that we can actually have in our lives. That's going to help us to prevent injury, to prevent going to the hospital, but more so, it's not about just prevention. It's about promotion, quality of life. And that's what we can do. And our success stories that are all over online and Yelp and all the different review sites, those are organically driven by our families we serve. And that's, as in the sales industry, I'm an educator. I'm not selling a cell phone here. I'm never going to try to increase hours on anybody for care. I'm going to try to fit into your plan and recommend what that plan is.
This is a vocation for you guys.
Correct.
It's not an actual job or business per se.
No.
A lot of it is going to be, and what I see talking to you more, and my experience with my grandmother too, is how do you build that trust before you have a problem, if it's possible, or if afterwards, okay, how do I get someone being the caregiver, the family member per se, and how do you get them to understand, how do I reach out to somebody right away from that?
Sure.
How do you experience, what phone calls do you get from hospitals or doctors, hospitals that they've gone, they have family that have to basically discharge, correct?
Yeah.
Discharge.
Yeah.
How does that work? Do they call you directly? What kind of phone calls have you had from that?
The fundamentals of how the procedures work, specifically from a hospital, is you'll typically have a case manager or a caseworker or a social worker from the hospital speak to the family and offer them a list. And on that list will be names of potential home care providers, potential DME medical equipment providers, home health, hospice, whatever the situation might be. And then it's up to the family. And a lot of times there's confusion based on what that case manager might say. They'll say, hey, call a home health aide, it's covered under insurance. What does that mean? So what's happening is a lot of the administration in hospitals, because they are so overwhelmed, they're just trying to push you out the door, and not for a malintention. They need to help the next person. And they need you to do your due diligence of researching who can help you, costs, what does insurance cover, and those sorts of things. So they essentially hand you a list. You look at the list. If you're on the list, now you start making phone calls. And which is why we're doing stuff like this, because we need our communities to understand what the reality is.
And I mean, I don't care if you use right at home care or somewhere else too, but get yourself educated so
100%.
You being the person who may have the injury or risk of fall will be covered for 1, 2 before you have that list in front of you, or the real result where you go, okay, let's sit down as a family and figure out what we want to do. At that point, the quality of life stays here for the senior or somebody of my age. I know that people have had heart attacks at 40 years old. Now they're disabled. And now they have problems.
Right. And now what do you do? So
exactly.
One of the things that I started at Right at Home was to bring the people that I could trust around me. And the idea was to create a group of individuals to educate our community. So it's CCA, which is Community Care Ambassadors.
Okay.
And the idea behind that was to get people around our arena that I can trust, that I would be safe to say, hey, look, I need you to call this individual for the VA. I need you to contact this individual as a senior real estate specialist to help you understand what you can do, whether it's downsizing, reverse mortgage.
Before you have
it. Exactly. So at least you have the knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's going to force you to make a decision except you. So, but if you have the pieces to the puzzle, at least you can put it together. Exactly. You know, and for us, that's all we can do. There's no initial, button I can press and say you're going to automatically trust us. You literally have to jump into the pool to learn to swim.
And you have to do your own homework.
Yeah.
You have to do your work before you have an injury, sometimes cognitive, where you can't make that decision, even from a legal standpoint.
And the right homework. And what I mean by that is when you go online, there's so many different things to choose from. You can't tell what's what because there's so much misinformation. So what I always suggest to individuals is just call me. Call Right at Home. Call, Dr. Anthony Rakovic here. He's going to be able to at least, hey, call this person. This way, you're not sitting there stressed out, worrying about money, worrying about care. At least you have the right information, and we'll do that for you.
I've used Dan before. I had my grandmother had a fall, and I had to call her. She's at UCLA. I called Dan, hey, look, what do I do? Do you have someone out here? Do you come back? And because you're national and globally, it doesn't matter where you are.
It's insight. Exactly. Just pick up the phone and ask. There's no fee for that.
I trust Dan and other companies, too. I go, hey, I don't do that. Yeah. Here's a card. Call Dan. Here's Dan's information. Here's Andrew's information, too. That point, you know where to go. But that trust initially in your own education of what's going on, what I hate to see seniors go through is they have a minor injury, becomes worse because they don't get the right care. Right. Now they see me, and now they have so much scar tissue and apprehension that they don't want to move. Now get them healthy again is almost impossible.
Just sitting here, I'm conscious about how I'm sitting, and not for the camera. I'm conscious about it because I don't want my day ruined with my lower back hurting or my neck hurting. And it's because of this guy, making sure their shoulders are back and my chin is up, so I have a nice little arc in the back of my spine. So, but I wouldn't know this stuff if I didn't connect. And so we got to make those connections. We have to formulate a plan. Take a look at what we can budget financially in case something happens. Doesn't mean you have to spend any money, just in case something happens. Because unfortunately, insurance just does not cover what we want it to cover these days, and we're working on that. We're trying to fix that.
I think a lot we're going to start doing, too, is going to be one of part, maybe part 2 and 3, whatever it might be. But Dan and Ann are going to start their own blog and YouTube and videos in the next 3 weeks. I'm putting them on a timeline to get his stuff started too. See, this podcast, again, you'll see the YouTube video. You're watching the Facebook Live video right now too. This is information for you. It doesn't help me at all. A lot of it is get you understand as a senior, as a caregiver, as a person, a human, maybe 20, 30, or 40. Now's the time to prep for this. Even looking at long-term care insurance too, insurance you can when you're younger is phenomenal because the costs are a lot less. So realize when you research now and looking at this video, hopefully you understand the need and urgency to take care of it now and understand where your options are versus waiting until you have an incident, as most humans do. All right.
Yeah, well said. And if you have any questions or concerns about what it is we can do, don't hesitate to call us. The number is 909-466-4646. 5472.
I'm going to put all this information too on the Facebook Live, on the YouTube. Again, everything we're going to have. And again, just call me. I have Dan's number on my cell phone.
Yep.
He's not like priority because my wife is, but he's like top like 10 or 12 or something like that.
Oh,
all right?
thank you.
All right.
I appreciate that. No, it's blessed to be here, blessed to have you.
Anything else I didn't ask yet that I should have asked that people are concerned about home care?
You know, if I were to leave you with two main things, understanding what home care is, it's non-medical. Insurance does not cover it, so you have to have a plan. Number two, we provide one-on-one care.
Exactly.
That often is overlooked, and it's not babysitting. Okay, it is providing quality care to help you live longer, and have that independence you need. But those are the two main things people need to understand. And, we're happy to help them in any way we can.
And I think the quality of life, too, you mentioned a second ago, too, we all want a better quality of life, right? So why would someone who comes out of the hospital, maybe someone you're caring for, want less? I think that should never be an option. We don't think about that until the incident happens.
That's right. We're very reactive. And so let's start to be proactive.
Good.
And if there's any insight that I can provide and help, if you have questions on costs, if you have questions on our services, reach out. I'm happy to help you. I'll always point you in the right direction.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right.
Appreciate it.
See you next time.
All right. Very good.